Hi phono friends, Don Wilson here with another exciting episode of As the Record Turns. It's been a while since I've posted anything, so I tried to think of something meaningful while I've been working hard at my day job. And what I thought that I would share with you today is some details about repairing diamond discs and in particular, the labels. The labels are notoriously fickle. There's not too many things that can be done for the playing surface repair, but I'll show you what I got. It's important to note that the playing surface of the diamond discs is quite a bit different from the 78s in that it's a composite material with skin on either side of an incredibly thin layer of what I believe is some flavor of Bakelite. Edison brands it condensite, but I think it's just some kind of Bakelite material. But what that means is that it's a thermoset plastic, which means that it's gelatinous. It's what is it made out of? Acetic acid and formaldehyde, I believe, and it forms a jelly, and the jelly can easily be injected into whatever shape you want it, and then as soon as it heats, it instantly sets into rock hard material. But then after it sets, it sets because all those little molecules they then branch and they cross-link. Is the term for it, and those cross-links are permanent, and cross-linked materials are incredibly strong. That's what all modern plastics are made out of, which is why they don't decompose, also why these guys don't decompose, and those cross-links are irreversible. So heating it does not cause it to replasticize. So while one can heat and flatten a warped 78, that doesn't work with a diamond disc. When a diamond disc splits, it's incredibly difficult to try to get the split back. You already know these things, but now you know why. The labels, they're just put on with some type of white glue. That's what they were put on from the factory. I have no idea why. This paper label, that's on top of the condensite, and it's paper, so why didn't they just press on the paper label? I don't know. But it is just a white glue, and that's why they come off. All of the other records of the era, they were you would have the two halves of the stamper, and on the spindle nub they would place the labels and then put in the biscuit of molten shellac, and then when the molten shellac was pressed, the paper label would become impregnated with that semi-molten shellac, so it would never come off, and it does a fairly good job at also waterproofing the label. With the Edisons, humidity will cause them to come off fairly easily. And another funny thing about the Edisons is, make sure that you can see this. So you can just steam the labels right off. This disc had the labels on, but they were kind of funny. So with a kettle with good, clean, boiling water, if you just let it hit this edge, try not to get too much steam in the spindle hole because that can cause swelling as it hits the filler material. But if you get the steam around this edge and then use a tool such as an X-Acto knife with extreme care, you can then lift it up, and eventually the entire label will start to peel off. And as you can see with this guy, it actually had two labels. I believe that this one was on the outside, and it was pretty well beat up, and it was lifting up and looking funny, and underneath it was this nice clean one. So isn't that odd? So this one I removed with steam. Has the records of my own, which I copy. Sometimes, if they're not really strong, if they're not well adhered to begin with, I will remove them with steam and then keep them in a nice envelope inside the jacket. Once you have the label removed, these can be cleaned somewhat. The ink doesn't adhere particularly well to the paper for the diamond disc labels. So again, some caution needs to be exercised when trying to do these procedures. So always recommended to do some little experiments on your own first. But what I found that works well to clean the labels is to take a tablespoon of OxyClean to about a pint of lukewarm water and mix it up so it's thoroughly dissolved. Then take the label and with it in your hand, lower it into that OxyClean and water solution. Let it set for less than 30 seconds. This is important. And then after that, do 2 or 3 dunks in room temperature water to wash off some of that OxyClean. And then gently allow the water to come off. And then you'll want to gently test with a soft, clean cotton cloth, dabbing off some of the water. The reason why this is such a fragile operation or delicate operation is because of the fragility of the paper and, believe it or not, how poorly adhered the ink is to the paper. If you let it soak for longer than about 30 seconds in water, the ink will actually start to lift. You can actually take the X-Acto and start lifting the text off of the paper fibers as they start to disperse in that water. After you've taken the label off and cleaned it, if you want to stick with if I'm sure that you've seen people that have used crazy glue and things like that, it never looks right. The masking tape here is just from when I needed to have some handy, but this is just plain old Mod Podge used for scrapbooking. I use the matte variety, and it's just a white glue. Probably works about the same as Elmer's. I have no idea. I have used Elmer's. It seems to work fine, but I use Mod Podge because it's cheap and easily available. So you just use, you get some brushes and you get a little practice, and you just kind of brush it on, and then get it on just so. And then after you put it on, well, you know how to glue things on. You just hold it on for a moment until it gets nice and flat and it stays, and you work out any air bubbles or things like that. And then you'll have a nice, well-secured label. Another thing that you can do, so if you have a label that's already on, but it's peeling a bit, if you take an X-Acto knife and you gently lift up, you can also dab in glue just like that, and then push down and massage it in real nice, and then wipe off the extra. After something like a white glue has dried, and there's always some that's going to come out into this dead wax area. That comes off really easy with if you take a bamboo skewer and cut it on like a 45-degree angle. You can use that like a pencil eraser and just take that right off this condensite. While you wouldn't want to use something as hard as steel because you can scratch the record, but if you take that bamboo skewer, cut on a 45-degree angle, you've got these firm but not too hard fibers that are coming out like this, and you just kind of go along gently. Obviously that will damage the paper if one's not careful, but if you can't figure that out, you probably shouldn't be doing this level of repair on nice diamond discs. With all these repairs, it's helpful to have a magnifier or similar. Often I'll also just use a pair of reading glasses from the drugstore. Magnifiers come up to 3 times magnification, and I believe you can get 3 times magnification reading glasses from the drugstore, so I doubt there's much of a difference in price. None of these things are terribly expensive. Last thing on labels. If your label's missing altogether, you can, of course, just type one up. Take scan a label and use a photo editing software and just type in your own text. Or we all owe a serious debt of gratitude to Mr. Charles Gregory for putting together this comprehensive 4-volume set of every freaking label made for diamond discs. It's just amazing. And you can go through this book. They're actual size. You just photocopy it. And then if you just have one, use a pair of scissors. Using a cuticle scissors, which have a slight curve to them, are even better. They make nice round cuts. But if you have a lot to do, then if you get one of these 3.5-inch hole cutters, they don't work great, and you're still going to end up doing a little bit of the work with scissors anyway. But, well, if you have a lot to do, it's worth the investment. I think these are 30 or 40 bucks, so. So doing the outside with scissors is easy, but you can always tell when somebody's tried to, do this with the spindle hole, and it never looks quite right. So if you get you have to get a deep reach hole punch, and this is 5/16. It's just a hair larger than the actual spindle hole, but it's insignificantly larger, and it makes it just a little bit easier to position. So 5/16 deep reach hole punch. And with both of these, they come with covers over the back. You want to take those covers off so that you can see exactly where you're going to punch that hole. And that's how you do it. Okay, that's enough about labels. Now let's talk a little bit about edge repair. With, as I mentioned before, if damage goes into the groove, geez, that's just a really tough one. I guess that you could use a little super glue to stabilize it, but it's going to tick. It's not going to be good for the diamond on your phonograph. But that's what at this point, that's what I've got for you. More common are the edge chips, which are, they're all over the place, and you find them even on mint condition records. That you get these flakes because this layer of condensite or bakelite, it's just so thin that it just flakes right off. So what we can do about that, there's a few things that we can do about that, and there's a lot of good options. The easy one is to just take some CA glue, de facto standard super glue. I can't say any brand works better than any other. And you just, you put a little bit on, and you go to the next one, and you go to the next one, and you can take off the excess with an X-Acto knife. And it's good to have some sort of a blotter that you're going to throw in the trash afterwards. Some sort of piece of paper or something to take off that excess glue because it may form a hump higher than you'd like to go. So you take that off and then, blot it on piece of paper to clean the blade, and continue, and then fill in each of them. This gets a little tricky, but if you can mentally remember where all these little spots are, you can then flip it over and do the other side. Really, you got to be cautious with that, because then you can, if you touch and then touch, you can get glue inside the grooved area. Not a tremendous deal, because the nice thing about these guys is you take a little acetone, and if you're gentle and quick, you can take that super glue off without damaging the playing surface. If the acetone sits on here too long, you will start to notice color coming off onto the rag, which is universally a really bad sign. If you've got really deep edge flakes on these guys, doing a million coats of super glue can be really laborious. So there's a couple different options to speed up the process, and it all depends on how much time you're willing to invest in this. For the sake of this record I had, it's in my own collection. It's one that I copied. So what I did with it is I stabilized it with super glue, and then I just filled it in with clay, and then made it as flat as possible. So then when I molded the record, the copies came out relatively clean. The spots may still be visible, but when doing this with super glue, it's very time consuming to build up many layers of super glue, but there's a couple options. The first option is you can just do 1 or 2 layers and then say, yeah, I'm done with it, and then use black nail polish to build up the rest of the height. The super glue just being to strengthen it, and then the nail polish to provide the filler material, so to speak. Nail polish tends to be fairly thick and dries fast. You can use multiple layers of super glue and keep going up. You can hit it with the spray accelerant, which freezes it, and then it's instantly cured. Another option that's baking soda, which you most likely already have at home. Literally a dusting of baking soda will catalyze its curing reaction immediately. It does detract from the glue's structural strength, but it does not detract from its adhesion. The amount that it detracts from its structural strength is negligible for this purpose. It will also add some color. May or may not be a problem, depending on your application, but a little baking soda just instantly cures. You wipe off any excess, put on your next layer of super glue, sprinkle on a little more baking soda, repeat, repeat, repeat. The same process also works fairly well for if you start to see separation along the filler, the substrate. As you may know, the early ones with the etched labels, they used wood pulp, and the later ones use they call it China clay. In either case, there's a phenomenon that any material that's below a certain particle size is automatically hygroscopic because of its particle size. It doesn't matter if it's something has inert, has a baked clay. Baked clay isn't going to tend to absorb much of anything, especially if it has a very low surface area and it has some kind of treatment that's been done to it. Just by virtue of the fact that it's small and has tiny little particles means that it's going to absorb water. And that means that they're going to swell. which is why we see diamond discs of all eras swollen. Usually spindle hole and the perimeter where the humidity can get to them. While there's not a lot that can be done about that, there is a little fungibility in being able to squeeze them. I wouldn't go so far as to clamp them, although I've not done much experimentation with that. I do suspect that cracking would easily become an issue. But if you see the formation of the lines here, indicative of delamination, filling that in with a layer of super glue will help stabilize them. That takes multiple layers. That is a little time consuming, but depending on the record, it's something you may or may not wish to do. Again, any excess can be wiped off with acetone if one is careful. Looking at my materials that I have sitting here, I think I neglected to mention one great little product, which is this guy. This is golden polymer varnish with UVLS satin. This comes in several different variations. I got this from Blix, which is a art supply store. Luckily, there's a few art colleges nearby. So I actually bought, it must have been a little pile of these, and these were not really cheap in a pile. They were $5 or $6 a piece. But I tried many of them on labels, and this one, when it dries, it is invisible. So if you have a label that may have be falling apart in some way, this is a really good way to seal it. 2 light coats using a brush, using the some sort of magnification so you can get the edge real nice, and then following it up with that bamboo skewer cut at an angle to clean the excess off the dead wax area is the way to go. The last thing that I have for you is a really excellent adhesive. It was kind of the holy grail of adhesives for a long time. Bugged the hell out of my dentist even. But it turns out that after I tried several of these UV activated adhesives, they sell them for smartphone screens, and there's a couple other applications. Turns out the dental ones, you need a dental license to buy the adhesive. Found that rather frustrating, but so I tried all the other ones that were available on the big online retailers, and they none of them performed very well. So I found this one and Bondic, B-O-N-D-I-C, no affiliation with them, by the way. I found that this one does work well. They claim it's not a plastic. They make a lot of claims, but it acts just like super glue, with the exception that it's UV activated. So you can actually put a drop or, well, I guess any amount, but typically a drop is what's used. And you can put this on something and it will stay liquid indefinitely. So you have a really long time to work on it, to perform whichever repair you need to do. And then it has this, this little LED ultraviolet light, which will set the adhesive. This UV light, it doesn't work great. It works, but you really got to sit there and hold it. If this is something that you really have a need or a want for, something that you plan to use many times, I recommend getting something more like this. This came with another one of these UV adhesive kits. The adhesive went right in the trash, but the UV light, well, the batteries need to be changed, but with all those LEDs with good batteries, it puts out quite a bit of UV light. So the combination of this adhesive and a good UV light, it really works well. And if I think this may also work well for 78 repair. I've only recently begun to experiment with it for that, so be sure to keep an eye out for that one too. The one last thing that I have for you, a little trick that I don't even know how I dreamed up this one. But so earlier I mentioned the delamination around here. If for some reason you have the need to seal this edge, one thing that I found that worked pretty well is this is pinstriping tape from an auto parts store. If you get 1/4 inch, it's just a hair wider, and they also have I think 5/16 of this. So if you wanted something that's a little wider that you could fold over the edge, you could do that. And it does fold rather well. It's basically electrical tape. I'm pretty sure it is electrical tape. It's just cut into these rolls, but you know, it's a few bucks. So if you peel off the backing tape, I'll try to do a quick little demo for you. If we peel off the backing paper, what I'm going to demo is that the actual tape, it's stretchy, just like electrical tape, because it probably is electrical tape. And what that means is that depending on how much you want to stretch it, how hard you pull as you are putting it around the perimeter of the disc, that you can vary the thickness, or not the thickness, but the width of it. So you can perfectly match this width, or what I like to do is I like to make it just a hair wider and then fold it over, because it is so flexible that it will do that. So I'll put this intentionally hanging over. You see how nicely that takes the shape. You can probably can't tell on the camera, but you can even see the texture of the edge. And then if we use firm but gentle pressure, make sure you can see that. That does a nice job of covering that edge. I often use this technique to protect the record from having silicone seeping into the perimeter when I mold them, and that's what I originally started using it for. Hopefully somebody has other applications for it. Well, friends, that's been a fairly long video. I think that's everything one could ever need to know about diamond disc label repair and edge repair. So any questions, comments, hate mail, love mail, whatever, doninphilly@gmail.com is my email address. I hope you'll like, subscribe, share on Facebook, all that stuff. But more than anything, I hope you've got good records and that you'll listen and enjoy them.